Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Public Relations at American Bird Conservancy. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel afterwards. We'll be putting the links referenced in the chat, but in case you missed them or can't copy them down fast enough, please know that everything can be found in a follow-up email that we'll be sending to registrants and on our website. Please submit any questions you have during the presentation using the Q&A box. We'll try to answer those as we go, and any that we can't get to, we'll try to do during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentations. We'll also be answering these questions via American Bird Conservancy, our host, as well as some of the presenters. Automated captions are available for this webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking on the up arrow next to the CC icon, then clicking Show Subtitles. You can drag them wherever you want on the screen then. Before we begin, I wanted to share some background about American Bird Conservancy, shortened to ABC, which was founded in 1994 with the mission of protecting wild birds across the Americas. We continue that work today following a conservation strategy outlined by the pyramid featured on the current slide. Our work strives to help keep common birds common and prevent the rare species from going extinct. Bird conservation works. Species and groups of birds have rebounded in the past decades, but it doesn't happen without people like you who care about birds. So thank you again for joining our webinar today. The phenomenon of fall migration is truly a marvel to experience. There are few better things than observing a kettle of hundreds of broad-winged hawks at the North Lookout of Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, or the endless sandhill crane flocks in Nebraska, or any of the other remarkable birds making these incredible journeys to their non-breeding grounds. Collectively, these birds will fly literally millions of miles across the entire Western Hemisphere. Geographically, fall migration for us begins in Canada and the United States. With that area alone, we won't be able to cover everything and give detailed specifics for each place, unfortunately, but we'll be sharing some highlights of ABC's work and favorite places our staff have in certain regions. You'll learn about the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachian Mountains region in the east, Central Texas, and the Texas Gulf Coast. If you have favorite places you like to go, please feel free to share those in the chat. We'll also share a more comprehensive list of places and tips in our follow-up email to registrants. So with that, we are now going to discuss some of the best hotspots to partake in the seasonal event, along with reminders of how we can support all of these birds on their journey. Let me introduce you to our speakers now. Lindsay Adrean brings over 15 years of experience in conservation, management, and research of coastal avian species to ABC. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Geography from James Madison University and a Master's of Science in Wildlife Science from Oregon State University. As the Northwest Program Officer, Lindsay advances conservation efforts for marble murrelets and other bird species in the Pacific Northwest. Liz Brewer started her career with ABC in the Appalachian Mountains joint venture in 2019 as the outreach forester, focusing on increasing private landowner enrollment in farm bill conservation programs. In her new role as outreach specialist, she works to coordinate outreach efforts across the joint venture's focal landscapes. She graduated from Purdue University with a Bachelor's of Science in Forestry. Liz is based in West Virginia right now. Anna Matthews was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. She left Texas for the freezing weather at the University of Minnesota to receive a Bachelor's of Science in Fisheries and Wildlife. While there, she discovered a passion for birds, grassland conservation, and education, which she continued to develop while obtaining her Master's of Science at Texas State University. She is currently the science coordinator of the Oaks and Prairies joint venture. And last but not least, Kristen Vale has a Bachelor's of Science in Wildlife and Fisheries Sciences from Texas A&M University and a Master's of Science in Environmental Science with a focus on shorebird ecology from the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Her thesis work focused on the distribution of piping plovers on the upper Texas coast, and Kristen is ABC's Coastal Program Coordinator in Texas. Lindsay is going to start things off now by sharing some great places to go in the Northwest. Lindsay, take it away.
Okay, working on sharing my screen. How does that look?
Awesome. Take it away.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm glad so many people could be here today. I wanted to talk about fall birding in the Pacific Northwest. I'm based in Oregon, and the fall is a great time to be birding here. So in the Pacific Northwest, we are part of the Pacific Flyway. So from this map, you can see that in general, we get a lot of birds during the fall migration that have been nesting up north in Alaska and the Arctic, and they start moving south either to spend the winter here or just to move through as they're on their way to warmer places. We get at least 1 billion birds on the move in this zone during this time of year. And I'm going to focus on Oregon and Washington today and recommend some of my favorite spots. So we have some different ecoregions in the Pacific Northwest, and I wanted to first talk about the high desert. So basically everything on the right side of this line is the high desert zone. So most of the east side of Oregon and Washington, where you're in the rain shadow of the Cascade Mountains. So this is a really dry zone, and it's characterized by lots of shrubby steppe lands. And this means that the various lakes and other water bodies are really important for migrating birds, and they're really good places to go birding. So Potholes State Park is kind of in central Washington. This is a really not very well known state park, and it's totally underrated. So I highly recommend it. It has both natural and man-made habitats, which means it draws a diverse group of species. There's a reservoir there, and at the end of the summer when the reservoir is low, you can see the mudflats covered with shorebirds, including both species of yellowlegs, which is a really fun test for your ID skills. And then the shrubs and mature trees that are in the area bring in flycatchers, vireos, and sparrows during migration. And the other cool thing I think about here is that you get lots of really interesting inland gull species. So if there's anyone out there who still just thinks that gulls belong at the beach, you should definitely come out. And then the second spot is the McNary National Wildlife Refuge, and that is closer to the border of Oregon and Washington, but it's right at the confluence of the Columbia River, the Snake River, and the Walla Walla River. So we get lots of waterfowl and also shorebirds here during the winter. As I was putting this presentation together, I actually learned that this area hosts about half of the Pacific Flyway population of mallards in the winter, which is kind of cool. And I did not know that. But I used to work in this area, and this is actually where I first learned a lot of my waterfowl and ducks in particular. And then beyond waterfowl, you get wading birds, water birds, and then raptors that like to prey on them, such as peregrine falcons. So here are just some pictures for you. The olive-sided flycatchers and the dusky flycatchers, they come in, they increase in numbers in the fall up around the Potholes State Park, and then the Cassin's vireo and the warbling vireo really like the mature and shrubby brush that's available in that state park. And there are those two yellow legs for you. And the Thayer's gull and Sabine's gull, these are both rare, but they do show up fairly regularly in this area. And they're just pretty cool to see. Check out those pink legs on the Thayer's gull. And then down at McNary, you get a bunch of the waterfowl. Pectoral sandpiper is a really neat one that migrates through, long-billed dowitcher and western sandpipers as well. So that was that was Washington. Now down in Oregon in the high desert, Lake Abert is a really awesome place for fall birding. It's one of Oregon's largest lakes, but it's also a saline lake. And so there are tens of thousands of eared grebes and phalaropes that can be found here during migration, and they're feasting on the brine shrimp and alkali flies that will provide them for fuel as they move through. And then the Upper Klamath Lake National Wildlife Area is really great for waterfowl year-round. The western shoreline of the lake is a travel corridor for neotropical migrants. And then you get a lot of the Arctic nesting geese and shorebirds coming through here. So at Lake Abert, the American avocet and black-necked stilts, they actually nest here. So you'll see them all through the summer, but then the numbers increase a little bit right before they leave. And then same thing happens with eared grebes. Wilsons and redneck phalaropes are seen mostly in the summer, but those numbers also increase in the fall. And then Baird sandpipers move through in August and September. And trumpeter swans also like this spot, which is sort of unique, and they start arriving in August. So once I'm done on the east side, then I move to where it's much more wet, which is out on the coast. We have the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, which is at a really unique location. It's at the very south end of Puget Sound. So it's inland, it's not near, the outer beach at all. But because of this spot, it is a really nice stopover for birds who are headed to the outer coast. So you can see some really cool species there during migration that you would normally have to go all the way out to the ocean for. And then out on the outer coast in Washington is Grays Harbor and the National Wildlife Refuge there. There are about 500,000 shorebirds that stop to feed here. And it's really the premier shorebird destination in Washington during migration. So in Puget Sound, you'll see green-winged teal and pintail numbers. Those go up in the fall and then they stay high all throughout the winter. The ones that I think are really cool are the sea ducks. Surf scoters and white-winged scoters pass through on their way to the outer coastal areas where they will spend the winter. And then American golden and Pacific golden plovers, they come through in October, and those are really cool to spot because they'll keep headed south to much warmer areas like Hawaii to spend the winter. And this wildlife refuge ranks really high on my list for accessibility. They have really awesome boardwalks that are great for families, kids, babies and strollers, and also folks with reduced mobility. It's also just really gorgeous. So I get up there whenever I have an opportunity. And then Grays Harbor, this is again where just the shorebirds are totally bananas. Black-bellied plovers, semi-palmated plovers, red knots, all kinds of stuff. And the peak there is in September and October. How am I doing on time? I feel
You're
like
good, Lindsay.
I'm good. All right, couple more. So I'll just move down to Oregon. Tillamook Bay, I used to live up there. It's one of our largest bays, but it's really shallow. So you get lots of mud flats at low tide. It's a good place to look for shorebirds. You can drive almost the full way around the bay, and there are lots of pullouts to bird from. And if you're lucky, you might even see the herd of elk out on the sand spit, which is pretty cool. The Oregon coast in general is really accessible for birding because Highway 101 is close to the water for much of the coast, which is not the case in Washington. But I did want to call out one particular viewpoint that is a total favorite of birders, and that's Boiler Bay State Scenic Viewpoint. I'll talk more about that spot in just a little bit. So in Tillamook, you get actually all three cormorant species: Brandt's cormorants, pelagic cormorants, and double-crested cormorants. And so that's fun to tell all three of those apart in the winter when they don't have their bright plumes out. We also have California brown pelicans. They start showing up at the end of the summer and they stay through December until they head back south to go breed. So they're sort of a reverse migration. And then we get Wimbrel and red phalaropes in October, as well as long-billed curlews. And then lots of waterfowl here, also bufflehead and common goldeneye in the winter. And then, oh yeah, I already said red phalarope. Oh, and the Brandt, you can't forget the Brandt. These guys come down from their breeding grounds up in Alaska, and they just look like little mini Canada geese. They're really pretty, and they forage in the bay in those shallow waters. Okay, so Boiler Bay. Boiler Bay is really cool. The bay itself is not very large, and it's not enclosed. It's actually just sort of an indent in the coastline. But the Boiler Bay State Scenic Viewpoint is like a little headland that juts out, and you can just drive right in and park. There are picnic tables. You're kind of up on a cliff, and this is an awesome viewpoint for birding. You can see a whole bunch of loons. The loons move through in large numbers, common loons, red-throated loons. You can also get marble murrelets there. They often hang out close to shore, so you get nice looks. And then during the winter, you can also see ancient murrelets there, which is really fun because, you know, they're not very common down here, and they don't breed here. They breed up in Canada. And then some of the more pelagic species that we get are sooty shearwaters and pink-footed shearwaters. And so that's a really fun thing to spot while you're out there. So I think that's it for me. Those are some of my favorite spots in Oregon and Washington. And really, you know, migration is peaking now, but we're at a nice place where a lot of our birds stay here for the winter. So really all through the winter, if you can't get out in September, October, you'll still see lots of great stuff out there. So
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Definitely makes me want to get outside. We're now going to cross the country and come east and hear from Liz about the Appalachian Mountains region. So Liz, once you get set up, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was so exciting to hear about all the cool birds out west. So now I think I will change things up a bit and talk about some East Coast birds. So like Jordan said, hi, everyone. I'm Liz Brewer. I'm the outreach specialist for American Bird Conservancy and Appalachian Mountains joint venture. Appalachian Mountains joint venture is a partnership of over 55 state and federal agencies, universities, and NGOs that work together to help declining birds. You can see on the map, the region we work in is very broad. We cover from southern New York all the way down to the northern parts of Georgia and Alabama. And of course, being such a broad region, there's just so many beautiful and bird-filled places to see in Appalachia. So I only picked two today to talk about two particular places where we're working with our partners to help improve habitat for declining songbirds. Those are in West Virginia's Greenbrier Valley and Allegheny Mountains, and then down a little further south in Kentucky's Cumberland Mountains. So our work in Appalachia is primarily focused on creating or improving habitat for declining birds. And while many wildlife benefit from habitat improvement, these are just a few of the species that we focus on helping. So cerulean warbler down in the left corner, wood thrush in the center middle on top, and then golden wing warbler on the bottom right are three of our major species. We focus on them because they all have very specific habitat requirements. So creating habitat for these species helps a whole host of other wildlife that need that same habitat. So we do a lot of work with private landowners to create habitat. Over 60% of forests in the eastern US are privately owned. So private landowners can make a really huge impact on bird populations by improving habitat on their own properties. My role as the outreach specialist is to connect them with programs that provide financial and technical assistance to help create and implement a conservation plan for their property. So first birding highlight is down in West Virginia, where I live and work. Here we work with our conservation partners and private landowners to restore habitat. Our focus is heavily on restoring young forest. Young forest is more open forest or old fields. They typically have no more than 10 to 15 trees per acre. They're interspersed with clumps of shrubs, which is perfect for ground nesting birds like golden winged warblers. And there's lots of new plant growth coming in. We also work on open and mixed forests, which are more mature forests that have large canopy gaps, and they have new growth coming up, and they have a lot of diverse structure in the understory. So lots of plants of different ages. Grassland birds are also a major concern in this region. So we're currently exploring ways to help boost those populations in the state. West Virginia has also somewhat recently installed something called Lotus Towers. So they're radio telemetry towers that help researchers track migratory wildlife. And there's a lot of cool places to go birding in West Virginia, but one of the coolest, in my opinion, is to visit the spot where that Lotus Tower was installed. It's called Hanging Rock Raptor Observatory. You can find it in southern West Virginia near a town called Union. It's a moderate 1 mile hike each way up to the Hawk Tower, but it's really cool and totally worthwhile, especially if you want to see some cool raptors coming through. It's a great place to see golden eagles, and golden eagles will come down and stay here all winter long. You can see just a huge variety of hawks there, broad-winged, red-tailed, red-shouldered, all sorts. And then they occasionally get falcons coming down as well. It's typically American kestrel, like the one pictured here, although they sometimes get merlins, and very, very rarely they'll have a peregrine come through as well. I recommend going late October for peak hawk migration. That time of year, they'll have sometimes thousands and thousands of birds coming through each day. So that's perfect time to go. The foliage is also beautiful that time of year in West Virginia. Now, if warblers and vireos are what you're after, our next birding highlight in Kentucky's Cumberland Mountains is a great place to go. So down here, we're working with a lot of different partners listed on this slide to improve kind of the same diverse forests. We're creating young forests, open mixed forests, and then also more mature forests. And our goal here is to create a really diverse landscape and manage over 12,000 acres, both on public and private lands, to improve habitat for at-risk wildlife. So we're working mostly in Kentucky Ridge State Forest, but just north of the state forest is a little state park called Pine Mountain State Park. I recommend going here instead of the state forest because it's such a beautiful place. It's just north, directly over the state forest. So you get all the same birds coming through, but the trails are a little bit more accessible. And there's lots of cool warblers this time of year that are coming through. You might see Kentucky warbler, blue-winged warbler, Blackburnian warbler, many, many more. There's also a lot of cool vireos that come through this type of year: white-eyed vireo, red-eyed vireo, yellow-throated vireo, and a little less commonly, you might see some blue-headed vireos coming through. And pictured here is a Kentucky warbler. The state park also has eBird lists, so list of birds that people have seen in the state park recently that you can look through to get an idea of what is coming through. It's a lot of really diverse species this time of year. So I recommend going now or through mid-October, and that way you get peak migration and peak fall foliage. And I'll just end by saying that if you own woodlands or farmland and you're interested in improving wildlife habitat, reach out to your local conservation groups or state forestry department to ask about creating a conservation plan, because everyone can help birds and make a difference. In the meantime, happy birding, and say hi if you see me on the trail in Appalachia.
Thanks so much, Liz. That was awesome. We're now going to center ourselves in the middle of the United States with Anna talking about Central Texas. So Anna, once you're ready, take it away.
All righty. All good to go as far as PowerPoint goes?
You are.
Perfect. So let's talk about migration in Texas, and we're going to specifically be focusing kind of on the central-ish region of Texas before we move down into the coast with Kristen. And this geography is going to match up with the Oaks and Prairies joint venture geography pretty well within Texas. And we're going to sneak a little bit over our border into a little bit of the Gulf Coast and Rio Grande joint ventures boundaries as well. So first, let's talk about why migration birding in Texas is so good. This is really where we have the intersection between two different migratory flyways, the Central Flyway and the Mississippi Flyway. So we have birds coming in from the Great Lakes region, portions of the more kind of eastern and midwestern portions of the United States. We have birds coming in from the upper Arctic areas in Canada, all down through the Great Plains, and they're all converging into this relatively small geography within kind of the central Texas area as they're moving down towards the coast and into Mexico, Central and South America. So we can see that reflected in some of these radar maps, such as this one that was collected just a couple of weeks ago. In Texas, and we can see how Central Texas is lit up really strongly. We can also see this in abundance prediction maps, such as those created by Cornell. For example, if we look at this one for the dick thistle, we're going to see Central Texas light up bright purple during spring migration as they move north. And we're going to see Central Texas light up bright purple again as they funnel through during fall migration. And this is a pattern that we see for a lot of different species within these two flyways. And as a result, we have some really great birding hotspots all throughout this area from Central Texas all the way down to the coast as these birds funnel through. We're going to talk about 3 different ecoregions today, and we're going to touch very briefly on just some of these locations. We're not going to go into extreme detail about them, but I do try to list variety of places for you to go to if you're interested in trying to bird in this region, as well as some locations that are very close to or even within urban centers like Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin, if that's an easier location for you to access rather than going out into the far hill country or up closer to Oklahoma. We're going to start with the Blackland Prairie and the East Central Texas Plains, which are kind of these pinky and orange areas associated with the red triangles. So we have a lot of locations within this area that's heavily urbanized. Historically, this area was prairie and oak savanna. A lot of these sites on this list still have pieces of open-like habitat, if not some pieces of prairie and savanna-like habitat that remain. But they also all are associated with some kind of water feature and forest feature. So these places are all really good birding hotspots because they bring in all sorts of species that have different habitat requirements as they migrate through. So we're going to get grassland species in those open habitats, we'll get forest species, and then we'll get all kinds of waterfowl, shorebirds, and water birds on those water features as well. Hornsby Bend, by the way, is one of the top rated locations within the eBird lists for the state of Texas during the migration period. And interestingly enough, this is actually a sewage treatment plant, but it has all of the right mix and it's located in the right place. And it's also extremely accessible if you live or are visiting the Austin area. Now, there's so many species that come through. It was actually really hard for me to pick out just a few species to highlight for you. But I do want to mention that we do get a great diversity of sparrow species that move through this area. At some locations, you're going to get a truly incredible warbler diversity that move through. Warbler Woods specifically has had records of 40 species or more potentially in some years of warblers moving through that particular site. We're also going to get all kinds of waterfowl moving through. And we also do have some pretty incredible flyovers if you happen to time it and be in the right place at the right time, such as whooping cranes. We'll get sandhill cranes flying through, and then lots and lots of upland sandpipers as well. And just a note, if you see an underline by a species, that just indicates that it's a priority species that we work on within the Oaks and Prairies joint venture. And if you see a star, that means it's a priority for the state of Texas. Now, I'd want to mention we do have a project nearby a couple of these sites that are kind of in the Austin area. We are working on loggerhead shrikes, a grassland bird species that's in extreme decline. We're doing nest monitoring and color banding on this particular species in a suburban park in this area to try to assess the effects of urban and suburban development on their reproduction, their survival, and even their movement. So very interesting project. If you're ever in the area, keep an eye out for some of our banded birds. You might be lucky and see one. Now, if we move west, we'll get into the Edwards Plateau, or more commonly, it's called the Texas Hill Country. And this is an area that just has truly beautiful places to go and hike, to do some birding. It's an absolutely special part of Texas that I highly recommend you visit at some point. What's interesting is that a lot of species during migration will actually skirt right around the edge of the plateau due to the increase in elevation and also due to vegetational differences from the rest of Texas. So we get some interesting species that come into this area that kind of pop in from West Texas during migration, pop up from South Texas, and then just an interesting mix that are there year-round or winter in that area as well. Some species that you might see would be rufous hummingbirds, great kiskidees, maybe popping up from portions of South Texas during migration. And you're also going to get a good mix of warblers and sparrows, especially along the edge of the plateau. And you're going to get some pretty good raptor and hawk watching along the eastern edge as those raptors and hawks kind of funnel along the edge of that elevation change into southern Texas and towards the coast. And I do have to drop too that if you come during migration, you have to come back during breeding so that you can see golden-cheeked warblers and black-capped vireos, which happen to be another species that we work on in this area. We do nest searching and monitoring as part of a post-delisting monitoring plan. Black-capped vireos were recently delisted from the Endangered Species Act, so we're trying to assess the persistence of those populations, see if those trajectories are continuing to trend upwards, and also look at the effects of brown-headed cowbird parasitism. And then last but not least, we're going to start touching into the coast of Texas, and Kristen will take it away after we talk about this to talk more extensively about the coast itself. But I did want to highlight a few places that are a little bit more removed from the coast, such as Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge and Hazel Baysmore and Welder Wildlife Foundation. These are some really unique areas that get a unique mix of species that you're not going to necessarily get in some of the other areas that I've talked about so far. So for example, Hazel Bazemore is one of the best hawk watch locations in the United States. They record in some years over 900 individuals passing through that area during migration from 28 different species. 98% of those tend to be broad-winged hawks. There's a lot of broad-winged hawks that move through, but you also get a great diversity of pretty unique raptor species that you don't get in a lot of other places in the United States. Additionally, if we move up to the coast towards Atwater, that's a very large piece of coastal prairie. We don't have very many of those left anymore, so we get a lot of grassland species that move through that area. And there's also some water features, so you get some interesting shorebirds. A couple of the species of note that you might be lucky enough to see include the Henslow sparrow, and of course, the Atwater's prairie chicken if you time it just right. Not a migratory species, but definitely one that you have to go see if you're in the area. And last but not least, we do work on doing habitat practices in a lot of the areas that I've mentioned so far using the Grassland Restoration Incentive Program, which is offered in the counties that you show in green. So as part of this program, we work with landowners to help provide funding for them to do habitat practices on their private properties that benefit grassland birds. So this helps us to increase landscape sizes, it helps us improve grassland quality, and it also helps us train those landowners in those good management practices so that they can continue to maintain that good grassland into the future. So far, we've worked on about 120,000 acres, and this is part of a network of other programs that American Bird Conservancy is involved with and other joint ventures are involved with all throughout Texas. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and back to you, Jordan.
Thanks so much, Anna. Another presentation that just makes me want to get outside and go see all these birds, especially with those quantities. I can't, it's mind-boggling. But last but not least, we are going to go to the Texas Gulf Coast and hear from Kristen about those birds. So Kristen, when you're ready, take it away.
All righty. Gearing up. Okay. Let me know if you can't see that.
You're all good.
Okay, great. So I'm Kristen Vale. I work on the upper Texas coast, but with many partners across the Texas coast working to protect beach nesting birds, as well as non-breeding birds on the beach, such as piping plovers and redknots. So I'm going to talk to you about some really great, wonderful birding spots on the Texas coast. So fall migration in Texas spans from August 15th through November 30th. So that is a really large window. And so you get a lot of birds funneling through the coast during that time. And some of those birds are just going to be stopping through. And for many, it's their final destination. So I'm going to talk about 3 different regions on the Texas coast circled in this red circle: the upper Texas coast, central Texas coast, and lower Texas coast. Now this map was produced by Texas Parks and Wildlife. It highlights different regions across Texas that you can visit or for wildlife viewing and bird viewing. So with that, that map is produced through the Great Texas Wildlife Trails. And I want you all to Google this Great Texas Wildlife Trails after this and learn about all the wonderful wildlife and birding locations across Texas. And there's so many that I cannot talk to you about today, but this tool is an interactive map. So this map on the right is what you would see whenever you go to the website. You click on which region of Texas you want to go visit. And when you click on that, it shows you all different hotspots and great birdie areas to visit within that region. So use this tool to help you plan your trips around some of the areas that I'm going to talk about. So I've put this link here on this slide, but it will be linked in the chat as well. So I'm going to start talking about some sites on the upper Texas coast, and I'm going to zoom in around the Galveston Bay region, and that's where I live and work. And a lot of these sites are going to be within about an hour and a half of Houston, so you can easily fly in Houston and just get a rental car and just hop around to some of these great sites. I'm going to start with Smith Point Hawk Watch Tower. This is in Smith Point, Texas. It's located within the Candy Abshire Wildlife Management Area. the red star, the red star on the right shows you where the Hawk Watch Tower is. It's pretty much in the middle of Galveston Bay. So it's completely surrounded around water. And so it's a great funneling spot for a lot of migratory birds. And it has many different habitats: coastal prairie, oak moss, bay shoreline. So it provides many different birding opportunities, not just the hawks. But speaking of hawks, broadwing hawks are showstoppers here, but we get a lot of Mississippi kites, swallowtail kites, wood storks, anhingas, as well as a lot of neotropic migrants that are stopping in those oak moss. So a lot of great birding opportunities here. Gulf Coast Bird Observatory, they staff this Hawk Watch Tower. They are a partner of ours. They help us protect birds on the beach along the Gulf. And so they staff this Hawk Watch Tower from August 15th to November 30th, but it's open, all times. And peak migration is early October. So we're really starting to gear up for some great flyovers here at this Hawk Watch Tower. And just wanted to note that hummingbirds are really coming through here in large numbers. We're kind of at their peak as well. So, hummingbird migration is great right now as well. So that's just all across the coast. I want to zoom now, get in the car and head over to Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge. This is a large refuge that does touch the bay. And so it has some diverse habitats: coastal prairies, freshwater wetlands, salt marsh wetlands, small oak moss. So it provides many different birding species. And so ducks, geese, gallinals, bitterns, rails, shorebirds, you name it, terns. So a very popular spot to visit at the refuge is the Shoveler Pond Auto Tour Loop. It's about 2.5 miles. This photo at the top, you can see, shows a glimpse of that auto trail. And so you have essentially wetlands on either side of the auto trail. So you get great views of birds really close up. It's actually almost best if you don't even get out of your vehicle. You depending on what time you get there. If you get there early fall, there still may be some small gallinal chicks or rail chicks that might be out for you. So this is a really, really great spot. It's a very important shorebird stopover place. And we get a large number of ducks in the winter. So our ducks will start coming in later fall migration. So a great stopover site for sure. We're going to head over to Bolivar Flats Shorebird Sanctuary. This is a destination on the Bolivar Peninsula, right at the mouth of Galveston Bay. So it's right next to the Houston Ship Channel. So it's a beach coastal area. So the habitats it provides are beach, intertidal flats, salt marsh, and coastal prairie. And the star here is really the intertidal flats. There's this large jetty that stops the longshore current. So a lot of sediment collects right there at the sanctuary. And so this is a very, very important shorebird migratory stopover spot. A lot of the Wilson's plovers will use this area as staging before they head to Central America. Piping plovers will stage here, but really a lot of them will get large numbers of piping plovers wintering at the sanctuary. You could see 100 plus piping plovers wintering here. It's their critical habitat. Or maybe you can see 40 of them roosting before they head even further south. So really good destination for shorebirds. To visit it, you can drive on the beach. It's open. You just need a $10 beach parking pass that you could get from the local convenience store or a grocery store and within the area. So we're going to head a little further west to Brazoria National Wildlife Refuge. Again, this is another refuge that does touch the bay, so a lot of diverse habitats. So we're going to get fresh and water and saline wetlands, coastal prairie, and some moisture reefs. So a lot of these areas that I'm touching on are really important shorebird migration stopover spots. So if you really want to get your shorebirds, hit up a lot of these refuges. And this refuge has a lot of moist soil units. So head out to those to get a lot of those shorebirds. Usually you'll have some water in areas where that is usually dry. So this area supports 24 different species of ducks in the winter and 13 species of sparrows in the winter as well. And this is an important refuge for sandhill cranes. So our sandhill cranes start arriving on the Texas coast in late October. So you'll see them all through the winter, feeding it through the coastal prairies and these moist soil units. So come out to this refuge to visit the sandhill cranes. They also have another auto tour that you can take, the Big Slough Auto Tour. This will take you adjacent to these moist soil units to get you really close to a lot of the shorebirds and ducks and sandhill cranes. So it's a user-friendly refuge as well, and plenty of different boardwalks and trails they provide. So, you know, continue to go onto each of the refuge's websites and check them out, the different trails. We're going to hop over to the Central Coast, and we're going to talk, mention Aransas National Wildlife Refuge in Oswell, Texas. This is a very large refuge that spans from the mainland across to the barrier Islands. And it, you know, spans across the bay. And this refuge is most famously known for supporting the whooping cranes. This is the refuge that supports the endangered migrant population that comes from Wood Buffalo National Park. So the whooping cranes start arriving in late October and later. So come late fall migration and come out to the refuge to see the whooping cranes. There's some other diverse habitats, oak uplands, coastal prairie, salt marsh, very similar habitats that I mentioned. So if you don't see the whooping cranes, or when you finish seeing the whooping cranes, there's still some other great birding opportunities. The whooping cranes really love to feed in the salt marsh bay habitat. They love the blue crabs. So sometimes it may be hard to see the whooping cranes, but there's some boat tours that operate out of Rockport and some other areas that will get you close to a lot of where the whooping cranes are foraging, that are further away from the trails at the refuge. So there's different opportunities. If you don't see the birds at the refuge, maybe consider going on a boat tour as well. And Port Aransas, Texas. So I just did there's a lot of places in Port Aransas. This is close to Corpus Christi. So there's 3 different places within Port Aransas that are key, birding areas that it was just too good to just say them all and just give one. So we're going to start with the Port Aransas Nature Preserve. This is mostly a salt flat, salt marsh habitat. The photo on the top shows you kind of what that habitat looks like. So another very important shorebird migratory stopover site. This is a photo of mostly Wilson's plovers. So I think it was over 100 in this photo. They were staging before they head south to Central America. There was a willet in there that snuck in. So they have a boardwalk that was destroyed from Hurricane Harvey, but they are rebuilding it. So there's still some platforms for you to see around the salt flats. And then the bottom photo shows you the Leona Bell Turnbull Birding Center. And this is more of a freshwater wetland habitat. It's actually effluent from the wastewater treatment, but they provide some great opportunities to see some really great waders. And a lot of alligators are in there as well. And lastly, there's the Aransas Beach. So just on the other side of this, you have the beach to go explore your plovers and sanderlings and gulls and terns. So 3 really great areas. The Port Aransas in general is just a really cute coastal community to visit. Real small. This community was heavily impacted from Hurricane Harvey, so they have rebuilt and are doing well. And the birding center photo on the bottom was actually rebuilt post Hurricane Harvey, so it actually has improved. So finally, I'm gonna talk about the Lower Texas coast. So the Lower Texas coast is its own unique region. It's more of a subtropical region. Very mild winters, and so there are many birds that are only seen here in the Lower Texas coast. So if you are in need of increasing your life list, I highly recommend going to the Lower Texas coast. And one way to help check off a lot of those birds off your life list is to attend the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival. This is in Harlingen, Texas, real close to the Mexico border. It's held every November. This year it's held November 9th through 13th, and they offer 120 field trips. And in 2009 Birding Festival, they saw 278 bird species. So as I mentioned, very diverse list of birds here, very unique regions, so that you've got beach, you got bay, you've got salts, you got fresh, you got a mix of it all. You got kind of deserty areas. So really great location to a really great way to just kind of get it all, going to this festival. Notable locations that you can visit, while at the festival or not, or on your own, is Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge, Estero Llano Grande State Park, Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge, and South Padre Island Birding and Nature Center. So those sites will kind of get you into the different diverse habitats and help you see those unique birds like the green jay, the common parake, the gray hawk, and the red crowned parrots. And last year we had the very famous bat falcon that showed up for a very long time, for majority of the winter. So I think it was mostly around Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge. And Estero Llano Grande, you can see there's a very famous common parake that sits right on the trail, essentially waiting for you to greet it. So a lot of these birds are pretty accommodating. The red crowned parrots you can see throughout the neighborhood. So some really great birding, easy birding down there as well. And so I just want to end there and just remind you, please go visit the Great Texas Wildlife Trails website to help plan your destinations across Texas or the coast. Thank y'all.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Goodness gracious, so many birds in so little time. I wish we could easily travel to all these places. I'm going to invite all of our presenters to now come back on camera for the Q&A portion, and we're going to try and get through as many as we can. I'm going to jump right in though and share one of the questions that came up both in pre-registration and during this webinar was about shifts in timing and location and behavior. It seems like there's a lot of change happening, especially climate change. So maybe you folks could talk about the impact of climate change on fall migration and the birds that we're observing. So especially Kristen, it's hurricane season. How are these things impacting the birds?
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of hurricane season, the increase of hurricanes that we've seen, in past years and what's predicted for the future is going to be very dangerous for these birds because, they're kind of timing their jumping off points to hit winds that are going to push them directly to the Yucatan Peninsula or further. And when you get these strong hurricanes coming in, it could push them off route. So that's an issue for them. And but one thing I've noticed, has changed. It kind of is some of these birds are not headed south when they should. Like example is the Wilson's plover. They generally almost used to always head south to Central America to winter, but now we're starting to see a handful of them stay on our coastline because I think our winters have become more mild. We have a healthy supply of food for them in the mud flats and the marshes. So I'm thinking that Wilson's plovers are just deciding it's because migration is very risky for them. Then they say, well, I think I might just stay here. So that's one thing that I have noticed in our region.
Thanks, Kristen. And what about you, Lindsay, with the wildfires out west? Is that impacting things?
The fires are, yeah. We, I think it was 2 years ago now, there was a large fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains down in California. And that wiped out about half of the breeding habitat that's available for marbled murrelets there. And we know from past genetics work that has been done that the murrelets that breed down there don't really mix with murrelets that breed up here in Oregon and Washington. So we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if they're going to try to nest in the remaining trees or if they will move, which isn't something that we think they've done before because those genetics are isolated down there. But if they try to nest in the trees that are remaining, the canopy is not intact and they really need a nice closed canopy to protect the nest from predators. So that's a big question mark. We don't know what's going to happen. And, Kristen was talking about, climate change and how that's changing things in her area. For us, wildfires are a big part of it, and then drought is another big part of it. Central and Eastern Oregon in particular has been in this severe drought for the last few years, and there was a question in the Q&A from someone here today asking about the lakes that I talked about earlier, and if those have been experiencing low water, and they have. One thing that we've seen is Lake Abert has been drying, and it's the saline lake. And so what happens when it dries is the amount of salt increases and it becomes too high. It goes past the tolerance level for the brine shrimp and the alkali flies there that are providing a lot of the food for the birds. So eared grebes are moving now and spending a lot of time in our coastal estuaries on the outer coast, and we've never seen them out there before. So that's a big surprise.
Wow, thanks, Lindsay. So speaking of food, though, I know that a lot of migratory birds migrate because they eat insects, and especially in cold Canadian winters and even parts of the US, there aren't as many insects, and so birds follow the food source. Anna, do you want to speak to how food abundance impacts migratory birds, and especially with, things like the insect apocalypse and these declines, how are they impacting the birds that we all want to see this fall?
Yeah, certainly. So insect declines have a lot of large implications for a lot of our species of birds. We've already seen over the past few decades incredible and scary declines in our grassland birds and aerial insectivores. The 3 Billion Birds paper that came out just a few years ago did a really great job of illustrating just how severe that decline has been. So as these birds are facing these challenges, not only during the breeding season, but as they migrate through the Americas, this is really if they're facing all of these challenges already during migration, whether that's from urban locations, having to move through cities, having to deal with climate change, having to deal with potentially cats in some of these urban and suburban neighborhoods that they move through, and then we add in this added pressure of insect declines, then that has really strong implications for the potential of some of these species to start to recover. Or change their trajectories. So, I think considering how the things that we do might affect some of these insects, these food sources, is really critical when we start thinking about bird conservation and what we can do within our own local areas or within our urban and suburban environments.
Thanks, Anna. That's a great segue into, I think, what Liz can help answer, because Liz, you work with private landowners, and I'm sure you even work with private landowners that own a little postage stamp lot. You don't have to have tons of acreage to make a difference to help birds. So these birds are, again, traveling hundreds, thousands, even millions collectively miles. They are definitely the athletes in this conversation. So how can we help them, Liz? What can we do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's so important that even if you just have a small amount of property, you can definitely make a difference and help birds in our own little way. Obviously, insects are a really important food source, but in the fall, soft mast is really important as well. So if you plant fall fruiting natives on your property, like viburnums, like American cranberry bush or arrowwood, beautyberry is another good one. These are really abundant plants that are really helpful. They have a lot of nutritional content that help the birds build up energy and fat reserves for migration. And getting rid of non-native plants like autumn olive and honeysuckle that birds will eat a lot of but don't have that same nutritional value is really important as well. And then there's other little things you can do, like not using pesticides on your property, help those planted natives grow a little bit better and attract some insects in for birds to eat as well. And then you can do other little things like fixing the glass on your home, putting, what's the word for them? The little tape on your windows to help with bird collisions, turning your lights off at night. There's so many little things we can do to help birds as they migrate.
It sounds like you want us to create like salad buffets instead of junk food stops, convenience stores in our backyards, because that is one thing that you all are really making me think about, is how each of our individual backyards, or maybe it's just the area around your apartment, really is like a little rest stop. Just like how when we take road trips, you need that gas for your car and you need the bathroom break and the food and everything. And that's what we're all trying to contribute for the birds. So really important things. But that also leads me to think, there's a lot of waste that probably comes with this. So Liz, you were talking about doing more natural things, not using chemicals and things. But then Kristen and Lindsay, I know both of you are working on projects dealing with trash and pollution and the impact of birds. So I don't know if either of you want to speak to how keeping things a little bit more tidy can be helpful. I know there's the saying that cleanliness is next to godliness, but maybe it's cleanliness is next to conservation. So Kristen, what do you want to say to that?
I agree. Yes. So on the coast, a lot of everything from upstream, we see literally funnels down to downstreams. It gets funneled down to the coast, and this is very true. You learn about this in school. Everything leads to the ocean. It's true. We see so many things that are from upstream, and so it's getting washed down through the bays. But also, it's stuff from beach users. Because I work a lot on the beach and bayside habitats. A lot of the stuff from people's setups around their beach towels gets blown away. So it blows into the dunes where the birds are nesting. I've had a whole hefty trash bag that was blown away and got caught on the beach at Bolivar Flat Shorebird Sanctuary, and a least tern laid its eggs on top of this white hefty bag. And so now you have the risk of this bag overheating those eggs, and then once the chicks hatch, suffocating the chicks. So there's so many different things. And so it is the leave no trace policy is more is more true than ever on the coast. It's everywhere, but it's important. So, there may be trash cans around your area on the beach or bayside or picnic areas, but a lot of times the wind will blow that out. Not every trash can has lids, or you have grackles or laughing gulls that pull the trash out of that. And so now, once the gulls and grackles are done tearing up that food bag, now it's blown around. And so just take everything home with you. Use Tupperware instead of individual snack bags, and just just minimal straws. Gosh, we see all those straws on the beach too. So reducing your straws intake, up inland, it does have a positive impact downstream.
Yeah, I can add to that too, Kristen. Up here in the Northwest, work has been done that has shown that human food waste has a big effect on birds. So the marbled murrelet nests in the forest, really high in old growth trees, and their natural nest predators are the corvids, ravens, jays, and crows. But work that's been done in California has found that when people leave their food waste behind, just crumbs from your sandwich or an apple core, things that you might think are sort of natural, when those get left behind, those predators are easily able to take advantage of that. Those birds in particular are really smart, and they'll rip open a trash bag, like Kristen mentioned, and then their populations increase in an unnatural way. And some of that food is also junk food for them as well. But for birds like the marbled murrelet, when the predator population increases, the predation on their nests increases. And this is true for snowy plovers as well. On the East Coast, I can imagine that it would be the same case for piping plovers and least terns and threatened and endangered species like that. And so making sure that when you're out there birding during migration, as you eat your sandwich, as you eat your banana, things like that, wherever you dispose of it, make sure that it is disposed of properly, that the trash can is secure. Even if someone else left the lid off, make sure you put it on. And if there isn't a good place to dispose of your trash, pack it out, leave no trace, and take it with you, because even something that you think is natural, like an apple core, it's not supposed to be there in most cases, and it's supplementing what is actually natural and wild food for predators that can then affect these other species.
Thanks, Lindsay. And this is great because we've talked about now what hobbyists, what birders can do to help enjoy fall migration. We've talked about things that individuals can do to help the birds. Let's quickly talk about some of the science and the research, because that's a huge component of migration as well. So Liz, do you want to start by talking about some of the current efforts that ABC is supporting to help learn about conservation, or learning about migration, which is going to help with conservation efforts?
Yeah, so a really cool thing just happened recently for AMJV and American Bird Conservancy in Appalachia. We got a $1.3 million grant to install about 35 new Motus towers all across Appalachia. So that's really going to expand the opportunity to see where these birds are going across Appalachia, where they're stopping during migration. It's going to help researchers learn a lot about what they're doing. So that's really great for our region. And it seems like Motus is expanding across the US right now as well.
That's going to be exciting to follow along, both this project and those birds. Lindsay, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we're kind of in the same boat here. The East Coast is farther along in setting up the Motus network than we are here on the West Coast. And so we don't have a great idea of where birds are going and how they're getting there. So we recently received some funding and were able to hire a Motus coordinator for the Pacific Northwest, who's going to start, or actually, I think it's for the whole West Coast, who just started work about a week ago and is going to be working with I think it's called the Pacific Northwest Motus Initiative. Anyway, it's a group of 30 organizations out here who are all trying to move the Motus network along and get more towers up so that researchers can put tags on birds and figure out where they're going. So
sounds like our audience should stay tuned for updates coming out from ABC. Our time is quickly drawing to a close though, so I'm just going to ask our final question before we wrap up. So panelists, think about it while I pitch it to you. And that question is, what is one thing that you hope everyone takes away from this webinar and shares with a friend? And we're going to go in order of the speakers. So Lindsay, you're up first.
sorry, can you repeat that, Jordan? I was reading the Q&A.
No worries. I want to know what one thing you want everyone to go and tell a friend about your presentation.
Yeah, I guess keep it crumb clean is my biggest message, because we all like to watch birds everywhere we go, and it doesn't matter the time of year, but your actions and the things you leave behind can affect the birds at then or in the next breeding season. So keep it crumb clean, tell all your friends.
And that's applicable no matter where you are, which is great too. Liz, how about you?
Oh, how can I top Lindsay's? That was such a good one, all encompassing. I hope people take away from this that you can make a difference, even if it's just a small contribution to conservation on your own property, and go tell all your friends about all the great things you can do for birds in your own backyard.
Thanks, Liz. Anna?
Yeah, I just would like to reiterate, the importance of all of these habitats, not just during breeding, not just during wintering, but also during migration. All of these locations play a role throughout the entire cycle, the annual cycle for a lot of different species. So doing good work for breeding birds can also have good implications for migratory and wintering birds as well. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And like Liz said, small actions, even on, your house in the middle of the city or your apartment balcony, can make a difference. And if you do have property where you can do some of those management actions, there are lots of options available to you to get assistance in learning what to do and how to best manage that property to the benefit of birds.
Thanks, Anna. And Kristen?
Okay, whenever y'all are out on the beach and you see large groups of birds, go around the birds, don't go through the birds. So many of those birds may have flown thousands of miles from the Arctic Circle, landed on the Texas coast or any other coastline, and are exhausted and starving and have low resources in their stomach. So walk around them, spare them a few calories, and do not encourage people to take videos of you running through the birds. Keep your dogs on leash so they don't run through large groups of birds. So we want to keep those birds on the ground and reduce any extra calorie expenditure as possible.
Thanks, Kristen. So with that, we're now going to have to end the webinar. But before we go, I wanted to share that right now at this moment, thanks to a very generous American Bird Conservancy supporter, all new or increased monthly donors are going to have their first 12 monthly gifts count towards a 1-to-1 match. Monthly match up to $25,000. That's a lot of money that can help us help birds. So please consider starting your monthly gift today to sustain our work. The link is going to be in the chat and in the follow-up email to our registrants. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. We couldn't do our work and help birds without your support. Hope you have a great fall migration.
Thanks, y'all.